Nike is the largest sportswear brand in the world, earning nearly $120 million every single day. World-class athletes like Ronaldo and Rafael Nadal trust their products. But would you believe that the man behind Nike was once a failed athlete himself? He started his business selling shoes out of the trunk of his car. This is the inspiring story of Nike's founder, Phil Knight. Phil Knight was born in 1938 in a small town called Portland, in America. From a young age, he was incredibly fast, and his ultimate dream was to become a great athlete. Throughout school and college, he worked hard on his running and won many races. Along with his passion for running, Phil continued his education, and by 1962, he had completed his MBA. Despite his academic success, Phil's heart was still set on running. But one morning, during practice, reality hit him. He realized that after dedicating his entire youth to running, he had become one of the best athletes in his state, but not at a national or international level. He was good, but not great. At 24 years old, he had reached his peak in athletics, and there was little hope for improvement. That morning, with a heavy heart, Phil accepted that his dream of becoming an elite athlete was over. He had failed in that dream, but he wasn't ready to walk away from the world of sports altogether. He still wanted to stay close to what he loved. As a runner, Phil had a deep connection with his running shoes. That's when he decided to go into the shoe business. Starting up. Phil remembered that during his MBA, he had spent several weeks researching the running shoe business. He even wrote a detailed research paper on it. In his research, he discovered something interesting. Japanese companies had revolutionized the camera market in America by offering better quality at lower prices. This gave him an idea for his next move. According to Phil's research paper, Japanese shoes had the potential to disrupt the US shoe market in the same way they had done with cameras. He believed they could even overtake giants like Adidas and Puma, the biggest brands at the time. It was a huge risk to base his business on a college project, but Phil had no other options. So he decided to import the Tiger brand shoes from Japan and sell them in the US. Tiger shoes were made by a Japanese company called Onitsuka. Phil gathered all his savings and booked a flight to Japan. When he finally arrived, he secured an appointment with Onitsuka's office. Before the meeting, he was incredibly nervous. Here was a shy, introverted guy, hoping to partner with a big company in a foreign country. During the meeting, one of Onitsuka's executives asked him the name of his company right at the start. Phil wasn't prepared for that, but somehow, in a moment of quick thinking, he thought of the blue ribbons he had won in all those races. And just like that, he said, "Blue Ribbon." He claimed to represent a company called Blue Ribbon Sports, a company that didn't even exist at the time, but the executives at Onitsuka loved the name. The meeting continued, and Phil delivered his pitch, essentially repeating the research from his college project. By the end of it, Onitsuka's employees were so impressed that they agreed to let his company, Blue Ribbon, sell Tiger shoes in America. It was a done deal. Phil gave them his address and asked them to send some samples of Tiger's training shoes. Phil couldn't believe his luck. He transferred the money to Onitsuka for the samples and flew back to the US, eager to start his business. But weeks went by, then months. 4 months passed, and he still hadn't received any shoes. In response to his letters, Onitsuka assured him the shoes would arrive soon. But in reality, nothing happened. Phil hadn't given up hope, but he needed a job to survive while waiting for the shoes to arrive. So he took up a job as an accountant at a small firm. Nearly a year had passed since his meeting with Onitsuka, and by this time, Phil had almost lost hope. Then one day, 12 pairs of shoes had finally arrived from Japan. Phil quickly went to collect the shoes. Excitedly, he unboxed them and showed them to his former college coach, Bill Bowerman. He explained his business plan, hoping for some feedback. To Phil's surprise, Bowerman was so impressed with the shoes that the very next day, he offered to become a 50% partner in the business. Phil was shocked by the offer. Bill Bowerman had been obsessed with shoes throughout his entire coaching career. He had been experimenting with shoe designs for years, constantly trying to make them lighter. He'd even take his athletes' shoes without asking, modify them for days, and return them after making improvements. These modifications often led to massive boosts in performance. Bowerman wasn't just a shoe enthusiast, he was a brilliant coach and a natural leader. For Phil and other runners, he was almost a godlike figure. And now, this same figure wanted to partner with Phil in his business. It was an easy decision for Phil. They shook hands, and just like that, they became 50-50 partners. That very same day, Phil wrote a letter to Onitsuka requesting exclusive distribution rights for the Tiger shoes in Western USA. He also placed his first order for 300 pairs of shoes, which cost $1,000. This time, the shoes arrived on schedule, and Blue Ribbon secured the exclusive distributorship for the Western US. The partnership was now in full swing. This was the moment Phil had been waiting for. Without hesitation, he quit his accounting job to focus entirely on his new business. He stored the shoes in the basement of his parents' house, which now served as the office of Blue Ribbon Sports. It was time to sell the shoes. Phil approached several sports shops, asking them to carry the Tiger shoes, but every single one refused. With no money to open his own store, Phil had to get creative. He came up with the idea of filling the trunk of his car with shoes and driving to athletic competitions. At every event, he'd talk to coaches, athletes, and spectators, showcasing the shoes and explaining their benefits. Phil had tried sales jobs before and failed, but this time was different. To his surprise, the response was overwhelming. His shoes were selling like hotcakes. As a former athlete, Phil understood the problems athletes faced and could easily convince them that Tiger shoes were the best solution. In just 2 months, he sold all 300 pairs from the first shipment. With business booming, Phil placed an order for 900 more pairs. However, his total earnings from the initial sales were only $2,000, and the cost of the new order was $3,000. For the first time, Phil went to the bank to ask for a $1,000 loan. Seeing the growing success of Blue Ribbon, the bank approved the loan. Finally, Phil had a career he truly loved. He had a trusted partner in Bill Bowerman and a product that practically sold itself. Phil was on cloud 9. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. But just when things were going great, an unexpected twist appeared on the horizon. A wrestling coach sent a letter to Phil, marking the beginning of tougher times ahead. The wrestling coach claimed that he had just returned from a meeting with Onitsuka in Japan and had been granted exclusive distribution rights for all of America. He ordered Phil to stop selling Tiger shoes immediately. Phil, who had only been in business for 2 months, was suddenly facing the possibility of shutting down. Desperate for answers, Phil wrote a letter to Onitsuka asking for clarification. Days passed, but there was no response. Realizing he needed to take drastic action, Phil decided to fly to Japan and confront Onitsuka directly. During the meeting, Phil laid out his case, explaining how he had been wronged and showcasing his strong sales numbers and future plans. The next day, he met Mr. Onitsuka, the owner of the company. To Phil's relief, Mr. Onitsuka was impressed by his passion and determination. He said that Phil reminded him of his younger days, and he re-granted Phil the exclusive distributorship rights for Western USA. Though Phil was relieved, his problems were far from over. In their first year, Blue Ribbon achieved $8,000 in sales. To help expand the business, they hired a salesman named Jeff Johnson. Like Phil, Jeff was a former athlete, and his passion for the business was contagious. Thanks to Jeff's efforts, sales doubled to $16,000 in the second year. But this rapid growth became a serious problem. Phil wanted to expand as quickly as possible. As soon as one shipment sold out, he would double or triple the next order. This aggressive approach meant they had to reinvest all their profits to pay for new shipments, and they also had to take out loans from the bank. After just 1 year of business, Blue Ribbon found itself thousands of dollars in debt. Worse still, cash flow was negative, leaving them unable to cover daily operation. When Phil went back to the bank for another loan, they refused. Without more capital, Blue Ribbon was suddenly at risk of running out of money to continue its operations. Phil knew he had to find a way to keep Blue Ribbon alive. So he took a job as an accountant at PwC, investing his entire salary into the business to keep it afloat. Meanwhile, his partner, Bill Bowerman, was hard at work improving the Tiger shoes. Bowerman noticed that Americans were generally taller and heavier than the Japanese, which meant their shoes needed to be designed differently. In his usual fashion, Bowerman began experimenting. He tore apart Tiger shoes and combined the best features of several designs. Eventually, he created the ultimate distance training shoe specifically for American athletes, which he named the Cortez. Onitsuka began manufacturing the Cortez, and the shoes were an instant hit in the US market. Thanks to Phil's management and Bowerman's innovations, Tiger Shoes became one of the top shoe brands in America within 5 years. By 1971, sales had soared to $1.3 million, with the business doubling every year. With this success, Phil finally quit his job and committed full-time to Blue Ribbon Sports. Everything seemed perfect, until disaster struck. Onitsuka, seeing the massive success of Blue Ribbon, grew greedy. They wanted all the profits from Tiger Shoes for themselves. They gave Phil an ultimatum: either sell 51% of Blue Ribbon to Onitsuka, or lose the exclusive distributorship for America. Phil was stunned. He felt betrayed. This was nothing short of a huge fraud. Onitsuka had crossed the line, and now they were trying to take control of his company. Faced with this betrayal, Phil made the biggest decision of his life. He decided to break away from Onitsuka and create his own brand. This marked the origin of Nike. Phil called his team together and said with excitement, "This is the moment we've all been waiting for. No more selling someone else's brand. It's time for us to create our own." With that, he cut ties with Onitsuka and decided they were going to make their own line of shoes. The first step? A brand new logo. Phil had a vision. He wanted a logo that captured the essence of running, movement, and victory. And of course, it had to look perfect on the side of a shoe. He brought in a young graphic design student to come up with ideas. After a few days, the student presented several designs. The team looked through them and finally chose one, a bold, curved shape that resembled a thick checkmark. Phil thanked the student for her work and handed her $35 for the design. With the logo in place, the next step was choosing the brand's name. A bunch of names were thrown around, like Falcon and Dimension 6. But then Jeff Johnson, the company's first salesman, spoke up. "Last night," he said, "I had a dream, and in that dream I saw the perfect name, Nike." He explained that in Greek mythology, Nike is the goddess of victory. The name just felt right. That's why the name Nike was deemed suitable and accepted. With the name settled, Phil hired a third-party manufacturer to produce the shoes. Nike sent them the designs, and shoe manufacturing began in earnest. On May 30th, 1971, Nike officially launched its shoes to the world. However, back then, Nike was relatively unknown. Competing brands like Adidas, Puma, and Tiger were well established and posed a significant threat to a new entrant. To make a mark, Phil used an innovative marketing strategy that was uncommon in the 1970s. He realized that runners preferred to wear shoes from the same brand as the top athletes. So Nike signed a deal with Steve Prefontaine, the leading runner of the time, to promote the brand for $5,000 annually. This made Nike one of the pioneers in using athlete endorsements as a marketing strategy. Phil's second strategy was to carefully select his sales team. Nike chose to hire people who were either athletes themselves or had a deep passion for athletics. This approach allowed the sales team to better understand the problems and needs of their primarily athletic customer base, leading to improvements in product design, sales, and after-sales service. Besides these strategies, Phil leveraged his own experience, an existing customer base, and Bowerman's innovative shoe designs to grow Nike. As a result, by 1980, Nike had expanded to a team of 2,700 employees, achieved sales of $270 million, and become the largest athletic company in the US, surpassing Adidas. Phil finally felt that he had built the strongest athletic brand in the country. But then, a company entered that shook up Nike: Reebok. Nike's primary focus had always been on creating the best performance shoes for sports. Style and appearance were never a major concern. However, in the 1980s, there was a significant shift in fashion trends and the taste for athletic shoes. People wanted more than just a strong, high-performing shoe. They wanted something that was stylish and attractive as well. Reebok provided exactly that. As a result, Nike began to lose its appeal, and for the first time, the company suffered financial losses and had to lay off employees. By 1986, Reebok had surpassed Nike to become the largest athletic shoe company. Nike needed to act swiftly and dramatically to survive and grow. To achieve this, Nike turned to a game-changing basketball player, Michael Jordan. At that time, Michael Jordan was an emerging star, and Phil recognized his potential to become a legendary player. Nike signed Michael Jordan as their brand ambassador and launched the Air Jordan line of basketball sneakers, named in his honor. Before Air Jordan, basketball shoes were fairly ordinary. Air Jordan, however, introduced bold colors and stylish designs that changed the trend in basketball shoes. The Air Jordan line became a historical landmark, bringing sneaker culture to the forefront globally. Michael Jordan, in his phenomenal form, wore the shoes during games, and Nike released ads featuring him with the tagline, "Air Jordan, it's all in the imagination." This powerful combination of performance and style led to Air Jordan becoming a massive success. Nike sold $100 million worth of Air Jordans in the first year and eventually overtook Reebok. Nike didn't stop after that success. In the 1990s, they expanded globally, conquering country after country. They ventured beyond just shoes and started entering other sportswear markets. Today, Nike stands as the world's largest sportswear brand, with a valuation of around $44 billion. That's an astonishing amount. Phil and Nike's journey is truly remarkable. The most important lesson from this story is about execution. As Phil wrote in his book Shoe Dog, let everyone call your idea crazy. Just keep going. Don't stop. Don't even think about stopping until you get there. No matter what others say, if you're passionate about an idea, take calculated risks and execute it. Nike's tagline embodies this spirit perfectly. Just do it. If you enjoyed this video, I recommend checking out the next one.